The Galactic Council Chamber on Concordia Prime was the largest structure ever built by any species. It floated in neutral space, a massive station where 17 spacefaring civilizations gathered to maintain peace. The chamber itself could hold thousands of representatives. Its ceiling was made of transparent material that showed the stars above. Ambassador Nathan Cole walked through the entrance corridor and felt very small. He was 54 years old, a career diplomat who had spent his life believing that words could solve problems. Today, he was not so sure. 3 days had passed since the attack on New Haven. 3 days since Admiral Webb had shown him the footage. 3 days since he had volunteered for this mission, knowing it might be the most important speech of his life. The chamber was already full when he entered. Representatives from 17 species sat in their designated areas. Some were humanoid. Others were completely alien. The Torvani looked like tall insects. The Melocs were soft-bodied creatures that floated in water tanks. The Krix had scales and spoke in hissing sounds. And then there were the Vorthak. Overseer Krax sat in the Vorthak section, surrounded by his guards. He was large even for his species, with dark gray skin and eyes that showed no emotion. He watched Nathan approach the central podium with what might have been amusement. Nathan placed his documents on the podium and looked around the chamber. Every eye, every optical sensor, every sensory organ was focused on him. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for only 50 years. They were considered younglings, newcomers who had barely learned to travel between stars. Most species did not take them seriously. That was about to change. I am Nathan Cole, Ambassador of the United Earth Government. I come before this council to present a formal complaint against the Vorthak Dominion for crimes against humanity. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Formal complaints were serious matters. They were also rare. Most species settled their disputes quietly. Nathan activated the holographic display. The footage from New Haven appeared above the podium, projected large enough for everyone to see. 3 days ago, Vorthak forces attacked the human colony of New Haven on Kepler 442b. This was a civilian settlement. There were no military installations. There were no weapons. There were 12,000 men, women, and children who wanted only to farm the land and raise their families. The footage showed the Vorthak ships descending from the sky. It showed the soldiers marching through the streets. The Vorthak killed 2,412 people in this attack. They murdered the elderly. They executed anyone who resisted. They took 7,000 colonists as slaves. Nathan pressed a button. The display changed to show a list of names, scrolling slowly upward. I will now read the names of the dead. And he did. Every single name. It took nearly an hour. The chamber was silent, except for his voice. Some representatives shifted uncomfortably. Others looked away. A few watched with something that might have been pity. Overseer Krax watched without expression. When Nathan finished, he turned to face the Vorthak section directly. I have transmitted evidence identifying the Vorthak commanders responsible for this attack. I have provided locations of the slave facilities where our citizens are being held. I have documented every death, every crime, every violation of the Galactic Compact. He paused and let his words settle. The United Earth Government demands justice. We invoke Article 7 of the Galactic Compact, which requires the immediate return of enslaved populations and full reparations for unprovoked attacks on civilian targets. Overseer Krax stood slowly. His forearms spread wide in a gesture that meant contempt among his people. The Vorthak Dominion rejects these accusations. The humans established their colony in contested space. They knew the risks. The Dominion simply exercised its right to claim resources and labor from unclaimed territory. Nathan felt his hands tighten into fists. Unclaimed? We registered that colony with this council 20 years ago. There was no dispute about our claim. There is now. Cracks made a sound that might have been laughter. Humans are young. You have been among the stars for barely a century. You do not understand how the galaxy works. The strong take what they wish. The weak suffer what they must. This is the natural order. Several representatives nodded at these words. The Torvani clicked their mandibles in agreement. The Cricks hissed what sounded like approval. Nathan realized something that made his stomach turn cold. Many species in this chamber had been practicing slavery for thousands of years. They did not see anything wrong with what the Vorthak had done. They saw it as normal. I call for a vote, Nathan said. Article 7, the return of our citizens and reparations for the attack. The council speaker, an ancient Melox floating in his water tank, called for the vote. Representatives pressed their voting devices. The results appeared on the central display. 11 against, 6 in favor. The motion failed. Nathan stood perfectly still. Around him, representatives began talking among themselves. The matter was considered settled. The humans had made their complaint and lost. Life would continue as before. I see, Nathan said quietly. He reached into his jacket and removed his diplomatic credentials. The small badge identified him as an official representative of Earth. He had worn it for 20 years. He placed it on the podium. The United Earth Government hereby withdraws from the Galactic Compact, effective immediately. The chamber went silent. Withdrawal was almost unheard of. The compact provided trade agreements, mutual defense treaties, and diplomatic channels. Leaving meant isolation. The Melox speaker leaned forward in his tank. Ambassador Cole, please consider your actions. Withdrawal will harm your economy. Your people will lose access to advanced technology. You will be alone. We were alone when they attacked our colony. Nathan looked around the chamber slowly. We asked for justice and received none. We showed you evidence of murder and enslavement, and you voted to do nothing. What exactly are we losing by leaving? Overseer Cracks laughed openly now. Let them go. Humans are weak. They have a small fleet and no allies. In 100 years, the Dominion will own Earth itself. They are simply speeding up the process. Nathan turned to face the Vorthak Overseer. His expression was calm, but something in his eyes made Cracks stop laughing. You asked what humanity intends to do now, Nathan said. I will tell you. We intend to come for our people, every single one of them. We intend to make the Vorthak pay for every life you took. Not because the Galactic Council ordered it, because it is right. With what army? Cracks spread his forearms wide. The Dominion has 500 warships. Humanity has, what, 50? 100 at most? You cannot threaten us. Nathan smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. You know, Overseer, for 50 years humanity has maintained a small defense fleet. We appeared weak, unthreatening. We wanted to be accepted by the galactic community, so we kept our weapons hidden and our soldiers quiet. He picked up his documents and turned toward the exit. That was a mistake, one we will not repeat. Is that a threat, Ambassador? Nathan stopped at the door and looked back. It is a promise. Earth remembers its children, every single one, and we have a very, very long memory. He walked out of the chamber. Behind him, the representatives began arguing among themselves. Some were concerned. Others laughed at the foolish humans who thought they could challenge an established power. Overseer Cracks returned to his seat with confidence. The humans were bluffing. They had to be. No young species could threaten the Dominion. But deep in his stomach, something felt wrong. The human ambassador had not looked desperate or defeated. He had looked like someone who knew exactly what was coming next. And he had smiled. 3 days later, the first reports came in. Human ships had been spotted massing near the border of Vorthak space. Not 50 ships, not 100. 300 warships, designs the galaxy had never seen, armed with weapons that made Vorthak scanners light up with warnings. The Dominion had made a terrible mistake. They had confused humanity's patience for weakness. They would not make that mistake again. For 50 years, humanity had hidden its true strength from the galaxy. They had built a modest public fleet of 60 ships, enough to defend Earth, but not enough to threaten anyone. They had participated in diplomatic missions and trade agreements. They had smiled and nodded and accepted their place as newcomers in the galactic order. But in the asteroid belt, between Mars and Jupiter, far from alien sensors, humanity had been busy. Admiral Christopher Ward stood on the bridge of the ESS Retribution and watched his fleet assemble. 200 warships had gathered for the first wave of Operation Homecoming. Each vessel was larger and more powerful than anything the galaxy expected from humans. The Retribution itself was a dreadnought-class ship, bristling with weapons that could crack a planet. "Admiral, all ships report ready," his aide said. "Weapons charged. Crews at battle stations." Christopher was 60 years old, with gray hair and a face lined by decades of service. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now it had come, and he was ready. "Show me our targets." The tactical display lit up with a map of Vorthak space. 14 star systems, 300 colonies, 500 warships. The Dominion had been a major power for 2,000 years. They had conquered dozens of species and enslaved billions. They had never lost a war. That was about to change. "First target is Draxus 4, Christopher said. "Mining colony. Intelligence reports 3,000 human slaves working in underground facilities. Vorthak garrison of approximately 5,000 soldiers and 12 warships." Commander Michelle Grant stepped forward. She was 42, a decorated combat veteran who had volunteered to lead the ground assault. "My Marines are ready, Admiral. We trained for exactly this kind of operation." "Good. Remember, the slaves are the priority. I want them extracted before we destroy anything." "Understood, sir." Christopher looked around the bridge at his crew. These were people who had trained in secret for years, knowing they might one day be called to fight. They had watched the footage from New Haven. They had seen their fellow humans being dragged into slavery. "All hands, this is the Admiral." His voice carried across every ship in the fleet. "For 50 years, the galaxy has believed that humanity is weak. Today we show them the truth. We are coming for our people. Anyone who stands in our way will learn why humans should never be underestimated. Fleet, engage." 200 ships jumped to faster-than-light travel. The stars stretched into lines of light. 6 hours later, they emerged in the Draxus system. The Vorthak garrison was not prepared. Their sensors detected the human fleet, but the commanders could not believe what they were seeing. 200 warships. From humans? It had to be an error. It was not an error. The ESS Retribution opened fire first. Its main cannons launched beams of energy that punched through Vorthak shields like paper. The first enemy warship exploded in a ball of flame, then the second, then the third. The remaining Vorthak ships tried to fight back. Their weapons, so effective against other species, barely scratched human armor. Human point defense systems shot down their missiles. Human shields absorbed their energy beams. "Admiral, the Vorthak commander is requesting communication," the communications officer reported. "Ignore it. Continue firing." The space battle lasted 18 minutes. All 12 Vorthak warships were destroyed. Human losses, 0. On the planet below, Commander Michelle Grant led 5,000 Marines in landing craft toward the mining complex. The Vorthak ground forces had watched their fleet die and knew they were next. Human Marines wore powered armor that enhanced their strength and protected them from enemy fire. They carried weapons that the Vorthak had never seen, designed in secret laboratories on Earth. They moved with speed and precision that came from years of training. The Vorthak soldiers fought hard. They had held this colony for 300 years. They were proud warriors who had never lost ground to an enemy. They lost ground now. Michelle led her squad through the main entrance of the mining complex. Vorthok defenders fired from prepared positions. Her armor absorbed the hits. She raised her rifle and returned fire, each shot precise and deadly. Push forward. The slaves are in the lower levels. The Marines advanced through corridors filled with smoke and chaos. Vorthak soldiers fell one by one. Some tried to surrender. The Marines accepted their surrender and moved on. This was not about revenge. It was about rescue. They reached the slave quarters after 2 hours of fighting. The doors were heavy metal, locked from the outside. Michelle placed explosive charges and stepped back. The door blew inward. Inside, 3,000 humans looked up with terrified eyes. They were thin and dirty, wearing the gray uniforms of slave workers. Many had scars from beatings. Some were too weak to stand. A young woman near the front stared at Michelle's armor. She saw the Earth flag painted on the shoulder. "You came," she whispered. "You actually came for us." Michelle removed her helmet so they could see her face. "We came for all of you. Every single one. No human gets left behind." The woman began to cry. Others joined her. After months of slavery, of believing they had been forgotten, rescue had arrived. News of Draxus 4 spread across the galaxy within hours. The Galactic Council watched in shock as reports came in. A human fleet had destroyed a Vorthak garrison without losing a single ship. Human ground forces had overwhelmed Vorthak defenders in record time. 3,000 slaves had been rescued. Overseer Krax received the report in his palace on Vortha Prime. He read it 3 times, certain there was some mistake. Then he threw the tablet across the room. "This is impossible. The humans do not have this capability." "Apparently they do, Overseer," his aide said, nervously. "Our intelligence was wrong. They have been building ships in secret for decades." "How many ships?" "But if this attack is any indication, they have far more than we believed." Krax paced across his chamber. The Dominion had enemies, but none had ever struck so quickly or so hard. The humans were supposed to be weak, a minor species, barely worth noticing. "Recall all military vessels to defensive positions, fortify our core systems, and send a message to the Galactic Council. Demand they intervene." But the Galactic Council was already in chaos. Ambassador Nathan Cole had remained on Concordia Prime as an observer. He sat in the gallery and watched the representatives argue among themselves. The Torvani wanted to condemn the human attack. The Melox called for calm. Several smaller species, those who had suffered under Vorthak aggression in the past, said nothing at all. Overseer Krax's holographic image appeared in the chamber, transmitted from Vortha Prime. "This is an unprovoked attack on a sovereign power. The Galactic Council must act. Impose sanctions on Earth. Demand they withdraw their forces." Nathan Cole stood slowly in the gallery. All eyes turned to him. "Unprovoked?" He let the word hang in the air. "You attacked our colony. You murdered 2,000 of our citizens. You enslaved 7,000 more. And when we asked for justice, you laughed at us. That was a lawful action under the rights of conquest. This attack is an act of war." "Yes," Nathan agreed. "It is. Congratulations, Overseer. You wanted war with humanity. Now you have it. The Council must. The Council voted against us. Earth is no longer part of the compact. We owe you nothing. We answer to no one." Krax's image flickered with rage. "You will be destroyed. The Dominion has 500 warships. Your little fleet cannot stand against our full might." Nathan smiled that same unsettling smile from before. "Actually, Overseer, we have not shown you our full fleet yet. Draxus 4 was just the beginning. While we speak, human forces are attacking 3 more of your systems. By tomorrow, it will be 6. By next week, 10. He leaned forward. "Would you like to know how many ships we actually have? 800. 800 warships that the galaxy never knew existed. We built them in secret because we knew this day might come. We hoped it would not, but we were ready." The chamber fell silent. "I suggest," Nathan continued, "that any species considering intervention on behalf of the Vorthak think very carefully about their decision. We have no quarrel with anyone else, but anyone who stands between us and our people will be treated as an enemy." He sat back down. "Now, if you will excuse me, I believe I have a war to watch." The Galactic Council did nothing. They were too shocked, too confused, and too afraid to act. Humanity had revealed itself to be something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined, and they were just getting started. Vortha Prime had never been attacked in 4,000 years of recorded history. The Vorthak homeworld was protected by 200 orbital defense platforms, 300 warships, and a planetary shield that could withstand nuclear bombardment. The Dominion's leaders had always believed their world was untouchable. Admiral Christopher Ward intended to prove them wrong. 6 weeks had passed since the attack on Draxus 4. In that time, human forces had swept through Vorthak space like fire through dry grass. 10 colonies had fallen. 200 enemy warships had been destroyed. 18,000 human slaves had been rescued and transported to safety. The Vorthak military was broken. Their remaining ships had retreated to defensive positions around the homeworld. Their commanders had begged for reinforcements that did not exist. Their soldiers had watched their empire crumble and wondered how it had happened so fast. Now the final battle was about to begin. Christopher stood on the bridge of the Retribution and studied the tactical display. 300 human warships had assembled at the edge of the Vortha system. Against them stood the last defenses of an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. "Admiral, the fleet is in position," his aide reported. "All ships report ready for combat." Christopher nodded slowly. He thought about the footage from New Haven, the images he had watched dozens of times. He thought about the slaves his forces had rescued, the stories they had told of brutality and despair. He thought about the 7,000 colonists who were still held somewhere on that planet below. Begin the assault. The human fleet advanced in perfect formation. The Vorthak orbital platforms opened fire immediately. Beams of energy and clouds of missiles streaked toward the approaching ships. Human shields flared under the bombardment. A few ships took damage, but none were destroyed. The fleet continued forward, returning fire with devastating accuracy. The orbital platforms began to die. One by one, they exploded in flashes of light. Human targeting systems identified weak points that Vorthak engineers had thought were hidden. Human weapons punched through armor that was supposed to be impenetrable. The Vorthak warships charged to meet the human fleet. 300 vessels against 300 vessels. On paper, it should have been an equal fight. It was not equal. Human ships were faster, better armored, and better armed. Human crews had trained for years in realistic combat simulations. Human commanders communicated instantly through encrypted channels, coordinating their attacks with perfect timing. The Vorthak fought bravely, but bravery could not overcome technological superiority and superior tactics. Within 3 hours, the orbital defenses were destroyed. Within 5 hours, the Vorthak fleet was reduced to scattered remnants. The planetary shield flickered and died as its power stations were destroyed from orbit. Vortha Prime lay open before the human fleet. On the planet's surface, Colonel Samuel Brooks led the ground invasion. 20,000 Marines descended in landing craft, targeting military installations and government buildings. The Vorthak capital city stretched before them, a massive sprawl of towers and domes that had stood for thousands of years. "All units, remember your objectives," Samuel broadcast to his forces. "Military targets only. Civilians are not to be harmed unless they take hostile action. We are soldiers, not murderers." Some of his Marines might have preferred otherwise. They had seen the footage from New Haven. They had heard the stories from rescued slaves. But they were professionals, and they followed orders. The Vorthak defenders fought street by street, building by building. They had nowhere to retreat, and nothing to lose. Samuel's Marines advanced steadily, taking casualties, but never stopping. The fortress palace of the Dominion leadership stood at the center of the capital. It was a massive structure of black stone and metal, built to withstand sieges. Inside, Overseer Cracks and the ruling council had gathered for their final stand. Samuel positioned his forces around the fortress and prepared for a direct assault. Then his communication device crackled. "Colonel Brooks, this is Lieutenant Lauren Davis from Intelligence Division. We have located the remaining human slaves. They are being held in labor camps on the eastern continent. Sending coordinates now." Samuel studied the information. 4,300 humans were still in Vorthak hands. If the assault on the fortress went badly, the enemy might harm them as a final act of spite. "Change of plans," he announced. "1st and 2nd Battalions, hold position around the fortress. 3rd through 6th Battalions, redirect to the labor camps. Slave rescue is now priority 1. His commanders acknowledged the orders. Within minutes, transport craft were lifting off toward the eastern continent. The labor camp was surrounded by walls and guard towers. Vorthak soldiers patrolled with weapons ready. But they were demoralized by the destruction of their fleet and the fall of their defenses. When human landing craft appeared over the horizon, many simply dropped their weapons and surrendered. Those who fought died quickly. Marine teams breached the camp gates and spread through the facility. They found barracks filled with human prisoners, thin and exhausted from months of brutal labor. Medical teams moved in immediately, treating the sick and injured. In one barracks, a Marine found a man slumped against the wall. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and hollow eyes. The Marine checked his identification tag. "Daniel Carter? Governor Daniel Carter." The man looked up slowly. He seemed to have trouble focusing. "Yes, I am Daniel Carter." "Sir, I am Sergeant Peter Quinn, Earth Marine Corps. We are here to take you home." Daniel stared at him for a long moment. Then tears began to run down his face. "I sent the message. I did not know if anyone received it. I did not know if anyone would come." "We received it, sir. All of Earth received it, and we came for all of you." Daniel reached out and gripped the sergeant's arm. "The others, the children from New Haven, do you know if they survived?" Peter smiled. "Yes, sir. Dr. Lisa Morgan hid 43 children in an underground bunker. They were found by our forces 2 weeks ago. They are safe on Earth, waiting for the survivors to come home." Daniel lowered his head and wept. Back at the fortress palace, Samuel Brooks had run out of patience. He gave Overseer Cracks one final chance to surrender. The response was a volley of weapons fire from the fortress walls. "Fine," Samuel muttered. "We do this the hard way." Human artillery opened fire on the fortress. Walls that had stood for 1,000 years crumbled under the bombardment. Marines advanced through the breaches, clearing room by room. They found Overseer Cracks in the central throne room. He was surrounded by his personal guards, but they knew the fight was over. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Cracks remained standing. His forearms were clenched at his sides. His eyes burned with hatred. "You have destroyed everything," he hissed at Samuel. 4,000 years of Dominion history. 4,000 years of glory. And you animals from a backwater planet, you have destroyed it all. Samuel removed his helmet and looked the overseer in the eye. "You destroyed it yourself. When you attacked our colony, when you murdered our people, when you took our citizens as slaves. You thought we were weak. You thought we would do nothing." He stepped closer. "We are not weak. We are patient. There is a difference." Krax was taken into custody, along with the surviving members of the Dominion government. They would face trial for their crimes, a process that would be broadcast across the galaxy for all to see. The war was over. The Vorthak Dominion, one of the oldest and most feared powers in the galaxy, had been completely defeated in less than 2 months. Human casualties were minimal. Enemy casualties were enormous. Admiral Christopher Ward stood on the bridge of the Retribution and watched the sunset over Vortha Prime. It was strange, he thought, that even alien worlds had beautiful sunsets. Admiral, we have received confirmation. All human slaves have been accounted for. 4,300 from Vortha Prime, plus the 18,000 previously rescued. Total survivors, 22,300. Christopher closed his eyes. They had gone to war to save 12,000 colonists. They had found more than 20,000 humans enslaved across Vorthak space, captured from raids that had been happening for decades. Prepare transport ships. I want everyone headed home within the week. Yes, sir. Christopher thought about the families waiting on Earth. Parents who had lost children, husbands who had lost wives, children who had lost everyone. We brought them back, he said quietly to no one in particular. The Galactic Council chamber felt different when Ambassador Nathan Cole returned. The same stars shone through the transparent ceiling. The same representatives sat in their designated areas. But something had changed in the air, something that every species could feel. Fear. Nathan walked to the central podium with the calm confidence of a man who knew exactly where he stood. 2 months ago, he had removed his diplomatic credentials and walked out of this chamber. Now he was back, not as a member of the Compact, but as something else entirely. Several seats were empty. The Torvani representative had resigned after his species voted to condemn the human military action. The condemnation had been ignored, and the Torvani government had decided that silence was safer than further provocation. 3 other species had withdrawn their representatives temporarily, uncertain how to proceed. The Vorthak seat was empty. The Dominion no longer existed as a political entity. Thank you for receiving me, Nathan began. I come before this council not to rejoin the Compact, but to propose something new. He activated the holographic display. Maps and documents appeared above the podium. The Galactic Compact was created 3 centuries ago to maintain peace among spacefaring civilizations. In theory, it prohibits unprovoked attacks on civilian populations. In theory, it protects the rights of all sentient beings. In practice, it does neither. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. They knew what was coming. When humanity asked this council for justice, we were denied. The Vorthak were allowed to keep their slaves, keep their stolen territory, keep everything they had taken through murder and violence. The council decided that human lives were not worth protecting. Nathan paused and looked around the chamber. We protected them ourselves. We rescued every single one of our citizens. We dismantled a military power that had terrorized this galaxy for thousands of years. We did it without the Council's help, without the Council's permission, and despite the Council's opposition. Now I propose a new compact, a real one with teeth. The document outlined a system of guaranteed protections for civilian populations of all species. Any signatory who attacks civilians without provocation would face immediate military response from all other signatories. No votes, no debates, no opportunities for delay. Attack civilians, face consequences. Earth will serve as the primary enforcer of this compact, Nathan continued. We have the military capability, as we have recently demonstrated. But we will not act alone. Any species that joins this agreement commits to contributing forces for mutual defense. The Malak speaker leaned forward in his water tank. This proposal gives Earth enormous power. Why should we trust you not to abuse it? Because we have already demonstrated our character. We had the military strength to conquer the Vorthak homeworld. We could have destroyed their cities, enslaved their population, taken revenge for what they did to us. We did not. We captured their leaders and gave them fair trials. We treated their civilians humanely. We showed restraint that no other conquering power in galactic history has ever shown. Nathan spread his hands. Earth does not want an empire. We want security. We want to know that our colonies, our people, our families are safe. And we want the same for everyone else. Join this compact, and you will never have to fear what happened to the Vorthak happening to you. The debate lasted for 3 days. Species argued among themselves, consulted with their home governments, calculated risks and benefits. Some were afraid of giving humanity too much power. Others were more afraid of being left outside the new order. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Every remaining member of the Galactic Council signed the new compact. Within weeks, 12 additional species that had previously avoided galactic politics also joined. They had seen what happened to the Vorthak, and they wanted to be on the winning side. On Earth, the survivors of New Haven were welcomed home as heroes. Massive crowds gathered at the spaceport to watch the transport ships land. Families who had been separated for months ran into each other's arms, crying and laughing. Dr. Lisa Morgan stood near the arrival gates, watching for faces she recognized. She had returned to Earth weeks earlier with the 43 children she had saved during the attack. They had been placed with foster families while they waited for news of their parents. Now, that news was arriving. A young boy named Tommy Parker had spent 3 months believing his parents were dead. He had cried himself to sleep every night in his foster home, unable to understand why this had happened to him. Lisa saw his parents step off the transport ship. They were thin and tired, bearing scars from their time in slavery, but they were alive. "Tommy," Lisa called. "Tommy, come here." The boy looked up and saw his parents. For a moment, he could not move. Then he ran faster than Lisa had ever seen a child run. His mother caught him in her arms and collapsed to her knees, holding him so tight it seemed like she would never let go. His father wrapped his arms around both of them, tears streaming down his face. Lisa watched the reunion and felt tears in her own eyes. This was why they had fought. This moment, repeated thousands of times across the spaceport, was worth everything. Governor Daniel Carter received a medal from the President of Earth in a ceremony broadcast across the planet. He stood on the stage with his shoulders straight, but his eyes were distant. Afterward, a journalist asked him how it felt to be home. "Home is not a place," Daniel said slowly. "It is the people you love, and who love you." For months, I was surrounded by enemies who saw me as property. I had given up hope. Then our soldiers came, and I realized that Earth had never forgotten us. That is what home means. It means belonging to something larger than yourself, something that will never abandon you. Admiral Christopher Ward retired from active service shortly after the war ended. He had accomplished everything he had trained for, and he had no desire for more fighting. At his retirement ceremony, journalists asked him about the campaign against the Vorthak. He did not talk about tactics or strategy. He did not boast about victories or statistics. "The moment I will never forget," he said, "was when our rescue teams opened the first slave derricks on Draxus 4. I watched on the monitor from orbit. I saw our people look up and see the Earth flag. I saw them realize they had not been forgotten." He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. "That is why we fight. Not for glory, not for territory, not for revenge. We fight because every human being deserves to know that they will not be abandoned. We fight because that is who we are." 1 year later, a dedication ceremony was held on the rebuilt colony of New Haven. The wheat fields had been replanted. New homes had been built. New families had arrived to work the land and raise their children under an alien sun. Secretary of Defense Catherine Webb attended the ceremony. She was the woman who had first received the distress call, who had ordered the War Council awakened, who had authorized the use of the Hidden Fleet. Now she stood before a memorial wall bearing the names of the 2,412 colonists who had died in the attack. A young alien diplomat approached her. He was Torvani, one of the species that had initially opposed humanity's military response. His people had changed their position after seeing the results. Secretary Webb, may I ask you something? Of course. The response to this attack was extraordinary. Your people mobilized hundreds of warships and fought a war across 14 star systems, all for one colony of 12,000 civilians. The diplomat's antenna twitched with confusion. What made this colony so important? Catherine looked at the names on the memorial wall. She read them silently, one by one, even though she had already memorized them all. They were ours, she said simply. But the cost, the resources expended, the risks taken, surely there is a point where the numbers do not justify. No. Catherine turned to face the diplomat directly. There is no such point. Not for us. Every human life has the same value. Every human being deserves the same protection. It does not matter if they live on Earth or on some frontier colony 1,000 light years away. They are ours, and we do not abandon our own. The diplomat fell silent, unable to understand, but recognizing that he had touched something fundamental. Catherine looked back at the memorial. The galaxy believed we were weak because we did not conquer, did not enslave, did not expand through force. They thought our patience was a sign of cowardice. They learned otherwise. Now they know what happens when you threaten what we love. She reached out and touched one of the names on the wall. A young girl, only 7 years old, killed in the initial bombardment. We do not forget, Catherine said quietly. We do not forgive, and we never ever abandon our own. The galaxy understands that now. They will not forget the lesson. Around her, a rebuilt colony hummed with life. Children laughed in the streets. Farmers worked the fields. Families sat down to dinner together, grateful for another day of peace. The sun was setting over the wheat fields of New Haven Colony. The sky turned orange and red, and the tall grain swayed in the evening wind. Governor Daniel Carter stood on his balcony and watched the peaceful scene below. He had lived on this world for 15 years. He had watched the colony grow from a small group of settlers to a thriving community of 12,000 people. New Haven was located on Kepler 442b, a frontier world far from Earth. The planet had good soil and clean water. Farmers grew wheat, corn, and vegetables. Scientists studied the local plants and animals. Families raised their children under an alien sun that felt like home. Daniel took a deep breath and smiled. Tomorrow was the harvest festival. The children had been practicing songs for weeks. The farmers had prepared their best crops for display. It was going to be a good day. Then the sky split open. A bright line of light appeared in the upper atmosphere. Then another. Then dozens more. Ships emerged from faster-than-light travel directly above the colony. They were not human ships. The vessels were black and angular, covered in sharp edges and weapons. Daniel recognized the design from military briefings he had hoped would never matter. Vorthak warships. The Vorthak Dominion was a species known throughout the galaxy for one thing. They took slaves. Daniel ran inside and hit the emergency alarm. Sirens began to wail across the colony. He grabbed his communication device and called Lieutenant Kevin Price, the head of colony security. Kevin, we have hostile ships incoming. Vorthak design, at least 40 vessels. Kevin's voice came back tight with fear. I see them, Governor. We have 200 security officers and small arms. They have warships. What do you want us to do? Buy time. Get people to the bunkers. I need to send a message to Earth. Daniel rushed to his office and activated the emergency transmitter. His hands were shaking as he typed the codes. Outside his window, he could see the first Vorthak landing craft descending toward the colony center. This is Governor Daniel Carter of New Haven Colony on Kepler 442b. We are under attack by Vorthak forces. Approximately 40 warships. They are landing troops. We have no military defense capability. Request immediate assistance. I repeat, we are under attack. He activated the attached cameras to record everything. Earth needed to see what was happening. Across the colony, Dr. Lisa Morgan heard the sirens and knew immediately that something was very wrong. She was the chief medical officer, responsible for the health of every colonist. She had treated broken bones, delivered babies, and cured diseases. She had never treated combat wounds. Lisa ran to the hospital and found chaos. Nurses were running through the halls. Patients were crying out in confusion. Through the windows, she could see Vorthak soldiers marching through the streets. They were tall creatures, nearly 7 feet, with gray skin and 4 arms. They carried weapons that glowed with energy. Everyone listen to me, Lisa shouted. We need to get the children to the underground bunkers. Now. Leave everything else behind. The colony had been built with emergency bunkers beneath the main buildings. They were designed for storms and earthquakes, not invasion. But they were hidden and might offer some protection. Lisa led a group of nurses to the children's ward. 43 young patients were there, some sick, some recovering from minor injuries. The youngest was only 4 years old. We are going on an adventure, Lisa told them, forcing her voice to stay calm. Follow me and stay very quiet. Can you do that? They could hear the explosions outside. Lisa guided them through the back corridors and down into the basement levels. The bunker entrance was hidden behind a storage room. She pushed the children inside, one by one, counting each small head that passed through the door. 43. All of them safe, for now. Stay here, she told the nurses. Keep them quiet. I am going back for more. She climbed back up the stairs and emerged into a nightmare. The hospital was on fire. Vorthak soldiers were dragging screaming colonists into the street. Lisa saw her colleague, Dr. Thomas Wren, try to fight back. A Vorthak soldier shot him in the chest. He fell and did not move. Lisa ducked behind a wall and covered her mouth to keep from screaming. Lieutenant Kevin Price had gathered his security officers at the colony center. They had set up barricades and were firing at the advancing Vorthak forces. Their bullets bounced off the alien armor like rain off metal. Keep firing, Kevin shouted. We need to give people time to reach the bunkers. His officers were brave. They were farmers and teachers who had volunteered for security duty. They had trained with weapons they never expected to use. Now they were dying for their families and neighbors. The Vorthak did not negotiate. They did not demand surrender. They simply advanced through the colony, killing anyone who resisted and capturing everyone else. Kevin saw his officers fall, one by one. He kept firing until his weapon was empty. Then a Vorthak soldier struck him from behind, and darkness took him. Governor Daniel Carter recorded everything. He pointed his camera at the burning buildings, the screaming colonists, the Vorthak soldiers loading humans into transport ships like cattle. He zoomed in on the faces of the Vorthak commanders, capturing their features for identification. They are taking everyone, he said into the recording. The elderly who cannot work, they are executing them in the streets. Children are being separated from parents. This is not a raid. This is systematic enslavement. A Vorthak soldier kicked down his office door. Daniel kept recording. To whoever receives this message, remember what you see. Remember their faces. Remember what they did to us. The soldier grabbed Daniel and threw him to the ground. The recording device clattered across the floor, but kept transmitting. "We are humans," Daniel said as they dragged him away. "We do not forget." The transmission ended 14 hours later when it reached Earth Command Headquarters. Admiral Catherine Webb was woken from sleep to receive it. She sat in the dark room and watched the footage 3 times without speaking. She saw the burning homes. She saw the terrified faces of children being torn from their parents. Her aide stood nervously at the door. "Admiral, what are your orders?" Catherine Webb was 62 years old. She had served in the Earth Defense Force for 40 years. She had seen battles and buried friends. She had always believed in diplomacy and peaceful solutions. But as she watched the people of New Haven being loaded onto slave ships, something cold settled into her heart. "Wake the War Council," she said. "All of them, tonight." "Should I inform the Galactic Council as well? Request mediation?" Catherine turned to face her aide. Her eyes were hard as stone. "No, not yet. First, I want to know exactly how many ships we have. All of them, including the ones the galaxy does not know about." The aide's face went pale. Everyone in high command knew about the hidden fleet. No one ever spoke of it. "Admiral, are you suggesting—" "I am not suggesting anything. I am telling you to wake the War Council. We have 12,000 citizens who are either dead or in chains. Someone is going to answer for that." She looked back at the frozen image on her screen. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, reaching for her mother as Vorthak soldiers pulled them apart. "Someone is going to answer for all of it."